Let's face it, we all have those moments where we want to throw our phone, grab the pillow off the bed and scream, climb into the shower and cry. The emotions are taking us over. We're angry, we're frustrated, and they're just dragging us down.
But what if they're really not? We want to talk today about how to master your emotions, but not in the way that you think. Because I think a lot of articles, books that I've read are talking about how you need to become this master of your emotions, that your emotions are quicksand, that they're pulling you down. And I think that that's exactly the opposite. And I've learned that in my own life, that as an entrepreneur, and even as men and women in the US for sure, we're raised that boys shouldn't cry, girls should put a smile on their face, and we should just go on and really pretend that we're not having the emotions that we're having. The problem with this that we're facing in today's society is we have learned to be stuffers, and all of us do it, where we're stuffing our emotions so deep that they get stuck in our bodies because we think it's horrible to express our emotions. We're embarrassed.
Right. Well, it's just like going to church and we call ourselves the frozen chosen.
That's if you go to the Christian Reformed Church.
Well, but yeah, I mean, you stand there and you're emotionless. And I think that that's just, an example of how we're taught, how we're trained and brought up to think.
Right.
And don't cry. If you get smacked in the nose, don't let anybody see you cry. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
So what are we supposed to do instead?
Well, what we're supposed to do instead is get clear on what emotions are going on in our bodies. And we talked about this in another press pause about we just simply aren't aware. We're not self-aware of what's going on with us. And if you're listening today, you likely have fallen into the same pattern, which is very common for an entrepreneur, especially one that's at the top of the organization, because how you show up matters. You need to show up like you have it all together. You may look like you have it all together on the outside, but inside you don't. Think about a duck on water that looks like they're just soaring smoothly over the top of the water, but underneath the water, their legs are just going like crazy. And that's sometimes how our emotions are happening for us, that we're acting all cool, calm, and collected on the outside, but underneath, we're really hurting inside. And so the solution is to actually look deep within yourself about those emotions and to realize that it's okay. We talk about in another episode, it's okay to not be okay. We think it's not okay to have a bad day. It's not okay to not be able to instantly overcome a challenge and to have the right perspective all the time. But instead, what's healing is getting in touch with those emotions and really realizing. So even
Pull out the Enola Holmes and be a detective and figure out our own emotions.
There you go. We've got to be the pain detective. I think that that's really important to be able to do that, because otherwise it's going to show up in other areas of our life.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So we've been reading the Mind-Body Prescription, really interesting book that talks about how a lot of the pain that we have in our emotions that's unexpressed goes to pain in our bodies. And so we end up having these physical responses to things that are emotions all along. So how do we combat this is we've got to get okay with looking at our emotions. And in fact, the Mind-Body Prescription talks about that most of the time, these high-achieving people who think that they have to be really good, and then they actually have to be even better, and then they actually have to be perfect, that we're creating this high bar for ourselves where we're just never going to be as good as we want to be, this perfectionist syndrome, that then we certainly don't want to look at those emotions that are dragging us down.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we have to first figure out what those emotions are. Mm-hmm. And as that book said, use those to eliminate pain in our body, which after I read the book, I had more pains in my body than I ever have. So I'm a little curious, but what's next? What do we do after we figure out and we're the detective of our emotions?
Well, the most important thing that you need to do is recognize what those emotions are and let them come, and not to identify with them like sadness, anger, I am angry, I am sad. Looking at your emotions as welcome visitors, that they're coming in as a visitor, that you don't have to be that emotion, you just have to feel that emotion. And that emotions are wonderful things. They're a tool to allow us see what's going on in our mind and bodies. And it's a, not a warning isn't the right phrase, but it's actually a reminder. It's like a messenger for us that there's something we need to pay attention to, that there's something that's unresolved. Great job making it this far and being committed to your personal and professional growth. Now, we want to make sure that you're able to take the lessons from this episode and apply them to your leadership in life. So we've created absolutely free a downloadable worksheet that you can download right now, and it's going to show you the top lessons of today's episode, and more importantly, help you create an action plan so you can take these principles and put them in process in your life right away. So go ahead and get this resource, and let's get back to it. Okay. So let's talk about frustration or anger. If you're feeling like your fuse is short, if maybe you're getting short with other people, that maybe that emotion that you haven't taken time to really address is anger. And that anger by itself, there's nothing wrong with it. You just don't want to do something with the anger, like towards somebody else, that's going to hurt them or hurt yourself, but realizing that anger is okay. So where we had read an article that talked about, oh, that's not good that you want to scream into your pillow. No, go scream into the pillow and get that emotion out, because then it's going to leave your body.
Is there someplace we shouldn't do it? Say a restaurant. Should we not scream in a restaurant?
There's probably appropriate places. I mean, think about what we're doing with our kids now that maybe we didn't do before, that's becoming more important, is allowing kids to really express who they are and how they're feeling. So if a child is having a temper tantrum, instead of punishing the child, which used to be the action taken, or putting them in a timeout and making them be silent, we learned that that's just making them suppress those feelings. So when we were told we couldn't be that way, we were punished for lashing out, we're punished for throwing a tantrum, then that shows that emotions are bad. So instead, our child needs to be able to have that tantrum in a safe place. So maybe they need to have it in their bedroom, and we need to be able to say to them, it's okay that you feel this way, and to accept that how they feel is how they feel, and that's okay. They just can't act out and hurt somebody else with it. We get to have those adult temper tantrums. If you don't if you don't have those temper tantrums, then they end up coming out in ugly ways toward other people, or like we were reading in the mind-body prescription that we talked about, it ends up becoming pain in your life or sickness. I mean, research has shown that stress, so these emotions, these stressful situations that turn into these things that are hidden in our bodies because we're not expressing them, we're not allowing ourselves to feel them, can lead to pain, that can lead to sickness, it can lead to something serious, it can lead to something chronic, it can ultimately to your demise. So not the way that you want to be.
Okay, so we're the detective. Yeah, we're the detective. Then we express it, and then we need to reframe that reality, right? Isn't that the next step?
I think that that's one of the things that you have to do in order to be able to move forward. Is I think the step before that is really understanding where that's coming from.
Okay.
Because if you are having a temper tantrum, you're allowing yourself to feel the anger. Think being not just the pain detector, but being the cause detector. Why are you, we're just taking anger as the example. So why are you feeling angry? Is there a particular situation that happened? It may come right to your mind. You may know what you're really angry about, or you may not. And you really have to investigate and just say, why am I feeling this way? Being it okay to feel that way, but investigating why you're feeling it this way. And then our brain tricks us. We tell ourselves lies. So how do we then, once we've determined what we're saying about a situation, then like you said, talk about then how do we reframe that? Okay. Can you think of an example?
How to reframe frustration or anger. Right. I think that there's so many examples that, just in day to day, rentals, we have some rental houses, and I think, the first thing I got up this morning actually, and a hot water heater broke, and boy, I had to reframe that. It's like, instead of, I have to go and deal with this at 7 o'clock in the morning, I actually just thought, well, at least when the new tenants move in September, because these people happen to be moving out, they will have a new hot water heater, and I can put that on the advertisement.
Right.
So I reframed the frustration, or it was not anger, it was just, frustration, but I reframed a broken hot water heater into a selling point to my next tenants.
Right. Well, and I think for you in this particular situation that we've had a number, as investors, a number of rental properties, and this wasn't the first issue. Had this been a kind of a new isolated incident, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But you've had a number of issues this last month where you've just had things breaking, just a number of things going wrong, and an unhappy client, an unhappy tenant, and then you have this water heater on top of it and haven't maybe dealt with some of the frustration of the other things, that it just becomes this thing on top of all of the other things.
Oh, for sure. If it was just the hot water heater, I wouldn't care. But it was the 42 other things in the last 10 days that just, are you kidding? One more thing. I can't handle it. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. So expressing then what you're frustrated about and what's legit, because it's not going to work to take your body out of this emotion if you don't talk about the reality of it. It's a pain that you're having to deal with this right now, and you could be dealing with something else, and just being honest that this was an irritation for you. But then the way that you reframed it, that, well, this happens and I'm going to get this replaced, and then it won't be an issue for the next tenant.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that that's a good way to look at it, reframing it. Because a lot of our emotions, we end up making up stories in our head about the particular thing that we're angry about, we're sad about, we're frustrated about, we're disappointed about, we feel shame about. And instead, if we can think of a positive way, an optimistic perspective, what that kind of spin on it can be, that if we view it that way, it can make a big difference.
Right.
So,
and on this particular rental, I have had plumbing issues since the day I built it. And so I was angry with the contractor this morning who built it 5 years ago. I was angry with the plumber who plumbed it. I was angry with the plumber who fixed the plumbing with the plumber that fixed it. I was angry with the plumber. I mean, so I had to go way back to dig deep to why I was frustrated. And it was because this house has been a plumbing nightmare. It's all this, I mean, now it's just maintenance stuff, but, but it was built on the fact that from day one, I had to fix some things that were done incorrectly. And so that was the frustration.
Yeah.
A hot water heater broke, big deal.
Right.
I mean, really, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But it was the fact that I've had a litany of other plumbing issues specifically on this house.
Well, just hearing you talk about this reminds me of a really great and helpful tool, is that we need to feel these emotions, and it's okay for a short period of time to just allow yourself to really be frustrated about it and talk about why this is irritating you and how this is built up, and allow yourself to just feel that frustration, because that's the way we allow that emotion to pass through. But don't make it the entire day, or that it continues to go on and one thing stacks on top of the other, that then, like you said, you have to reframe it and let it go. But taking some time, sometimes just saying, okay, for 10 minutes, we're going to whine and complain about this. We're going to talk about how frustrated this is, all of these issues that we're having. And then we are going to let that go and reframe it. Because the problem with these emotions that we have to be careful of is that what we think and what we feel becomes how we act, becomes how we live, becomes our life. And what we're doing through our thoughts and our behaviors is we are wiring the receptors in our brain. And we don't want to wire in these feelings of anger and frustration, because then that's going to be unhealthy in our brains. It's going to be toxic to our brains. So we can feel and let these emotions through, but then it's important to then reframe them, to have that new perspective of what way we're going to look at things. Because when we bring an optimistic perspective in, then that reframes our thoughts, it reframes our behaviors, and it also rewires the circuits in our brain in a positive way.
Right. So if we're rewiring our brain, and we've identified it, we investigated it, we were the detective, we've identified it, we felt it. Then what do we do to kind of just move on? What are some strategies that we can take?
Well, I think there's a number of tools just to help us do this. I don't believe this is a one and done. It certainly hasn't been in my life, and the clients that we work with, we're really helping them with mindfulness and optimism in their life. And it becomes about a daily practice, really, that you need to be able to take sometime in your day where you're checking in with yourself and you're really looking at, how did I do today? How did I show up today? What was my day like? What was frustrating me? What went well? What do I want to do different? And those type of self-awareness techniques, which we've talked about before, having that mindful check-in every day, we call it morning mindful moment, where you take a look at how you're doing, how you're feeling in your body, what emotions you're maybe going through, and going through this process can be very helpful on a daily basis.
So would you do it in the morning and reflect on the day before, or do you do it to close out the night before?
You know, it's up to you. I mean, for myself, I found a really great practice is every morning I do my morning mindful moment and I check in with how I'm doing right now as I've gotten up in the morning. But I also look back and do a check-in on the day before. And how did I do? Did I show up as the person that I wanted to be? Was I aware? Was I self-aware throughout the day? Was I being mindful and present in my life, or was I worrying about the future or having regrets of the past? What was I doing? And doing that check-in is really important. And that allows you to think about, you know, what emotions maybe are still resonating for you that you need to deal with. And by dealing with, I mean recognizing what they are, where they're coming from, giving yourself a little bit of space to feel them. And then when you do that, when you accept it, when you surrender to it, then they just pass on by.
Right.
Right.
Something you do really well, and we talk about a lot, is your journaling as well. You can write down your emotions.
Right.
Reading a book right now, actually, and the mother was really good at writing down everything in the journal. So she figured her daughter should be as well. And her daughter just passed away in her mid-20s, and she went to grab her journals just to reminisce. And she bought her a journal every year for her Christmas present since the age of 5. She passed away, say 25, so 20 journals. And there wasn't one letter.
One entry
in any of them. I was like, oh, that poor mother was crushed. But you do a good job. You go through journals every 6 months or more, probably.
Right. And writing down our thoughts and emotions really does make a difference. If you can look at those emotions that we're talking about, if you're feeling that emotion of anger or sadness or shame, once you've identified what that emotion is, where it's coming from, writing down what those triggers are for you and those things that are bringing up frustration, that are causing that emotion. Because it's amazing when you actually write that down, how that just helps to release it for you.
Good.
No, it's good. And then realizing that you have a choice, that your emotions are okay, that they're welcome, that they're a normal part of life, and that you want to welcome them and accept them.
Good.
Is how you then master your emotions.
What else do we need to do? Does that cover it?
I think that's a really good start of mastering emotions. I think the main thing is that we are being contrary to the fact of you need to master your emotions because they're ugly and you don't want them to be seen by anybody, and therefore you need to get rid of them. Instead, you want to welcome your emotions. You want to accept them as welcome visitors and learn about yourself through experiencing your emotions, and that just helps you to be a healthy, happy human being.
So go out, throw a temper tantrum, and scream in a pillow, cry in the shower, because it's good for us to share and feel all of our emotions.
It is, and that's a great start. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, to really help you grow in your leadership and level up your life and your mindset.
Watch one of these other videos, share with a friend, and don't forget, download the PDF from today's topic so that you can make sure to hold yourself accountable and take that action plan and use it.
Have a great day.